one, so take your time. Hey everybody, Garry Adelman, American Battlefield Trust. We are in the Wheatfield at Gettysburg. I think it's around 17 acres, but I could be off by like 2 dozen or something like that. But there's so much going on here. We are still trying to figure this out. You're with the American Battlefield Trust. This is Gettysburg 157. We're posting these due to lack of connectivity as fast as we can to try to cover as much of the second day as possible. Make sure you share this with your friends so as many people can participate in this commemoration as possible. This is an extraordinarily confusing action. It's called the Whirlpool of Battle. It's also Gettysburg's, if you include the surrounding area, most deadly action, at least in my opinion. And just to summarize this year, this is July 2nd, 1863. The fight for Devil's Den is already over, but this takes place right after it, or starts right after it. The fight for Little Round Top is basically over, okay? So it's starting to get later. We're talking about 6:30 when the fight for the Wheatfield heats up. And this is the 3rd Corps. Dan Sickles moves his men forward out to the Emmitsburg Road and bends back through the Wheatfield to Devil's Den. But don't ever think that he has any sort of a semblance of a line. He's got little gaps covered by artillery and not even covered. And in this area, he seems to have a few reinforcements, but really just the 17th Maine over here. But up comes the entire 5th Corps, sent to the Union left to hold it at all hazards. Up comes an entire division of the 2nd Corps. And if you want to remember any divisions, start with that. I think I already talked about it. Cross Kelly, Zook, and Brook. It's the easiest division to remember, with the possible exception of Candy, Kane, and Green in Geary's division of the 12th Corps. In any case, things get confusing very quickly, and that goes for the 3rd Corps specifically, which can't even keep its corps together. So let's bring on Doug Ullman. Used to work with the Civil War Trust, now does a lot of contract work for the American Battlefield Trust. Doug?
Right, so behind me is the regimental monument to the 8th New Jersey. The 8th New Jersey is of George Burling's brigade, which is from Andrew Humphrey's 2nd Division of the 3rd Corps. There are 2 divisions in Sickles' corps. And those 2 divisions are not going to be long enough to cover the line that he will ultimately hold on the Emmitsburg Road. He's got the peach orchard all the way to Devil's Den, and that is way too long a line for his 2 divisions. And so in order to help make good the deficiencies of his line, he's going to take 2 brigades, one from each division. We have de Trobriand of the 1st Division and Burling's of the 2nd Division, and he is going to break them apart to fill different gaps in the whole. And so at no point on the battlefield anywhere where the 3rd Corps fought do you see anywhere where there's only one unit from one division. Units of both divisions are represented throughout the 3rd Corps line, throughout the fighting on the 2nd of July 1863. So Burling's brigade is perhaps the worst example of this, because he's going to have 2 regiments. The 2nd New Hampshire and the 7th New Jersey are going to be sent off to support the peach orchard. The 8th New Jersey is going to come over here. The 5th New Jersey is going to be picketing on the Emmitsburg Road, and the 6th New Jersey is going to end up in the Valley of Death behind Devil's Den. He basically has no command whatsoever, and this is going to piss him off. It's going to piss off his boss, Andrew Humphreys, who's going to be pissed off about the system, if it deserves such a name, as he said, of peeling off regiments to support other places in the line. And as the only person I know who went to the same school as Dan Sickles, I don't like to knock on a fellow NYU graduate, but this was a line that he could not have held, even if it was a good idea to come out here in the first place. So as we're here, we see this brigade, this regiment, the 8th New Jersey of Burling's brigade. The next brigade marker is the 115th. That's another regiment of Burling's brigade. Then the 17th Maine, which is of de Trobriand's brigade. I haven't even talked about Régis de Trobriand, a Frenchman whose brigade is going to be split up as well. He's going to have regiments fighting here in the Wheatfield, and also in the Devil's Den, and also on the peach orchard. So again, we have 2 brigades that end up split up throughout the entire length of the corps line because it is just too long a line to hold. Garry?
Yeah, thanks, Doug. And before we go any further, I think we have to stop right here and ask our 2 experts. We've got Doug Douds, licensed battlefield guide, with us as well. Does anyone know de Trobriand's full name?
Oh,
look at them. They're like deflated.
Yeah. I'll give it. It's Regis.
No, it's Philippe.
Philippe Regis.
Philippe Regis
de Carandin.
de Carandin de Trobriand.
Oh, yeah.
All right, I'll call that a win here. Please know
The
that
wisdom of the crowd. Can I call a friend?
de Trobriand's 17th Maine. Watch yourself there. Chris Mackowski behind the camera. The 17th Maine, to skip forward a little bit, is going to end up facing that way, okay? They're dealing death into the 3rd Arkansas. That's the fight for Devil's Den. It's only 500 yards away from here, and they are pouring a fire into the 3rd Arkansas, forcing them to bend back, as we call matrix style, a little bit, maybe a little bit more than that. And But when the fight for the Wheatfield really heats up, when you have Kershaw's South Carolinians and others coming this way, suddenly the 17th Maine will refuse its right companies, okay? And they said that they refused those along a fence line in a patch of alder trees. And alder are these sticky little thick trees, and I always like to picture them. I like that account so much, I planted an alder tree on my front yard. It was terrible. It was all sticky. It died. It's probably my own fault. In any case, so here's the 17th Maine, and I'll walk next to you if you can focus on it there, Chris. You can see the red diamond of the First Division, 3rd Corps. I was at Gettysburg. I wore the Kearney patch. They took that very seriously. They were very, happy that they started the whole Corps insignia system. You can see the soldier on top of the monument, and when the tree clears, you'll be able to see there they are next to the stone wall, or depicted behind the stone wall. Now, I don't want to mess with this tour up here, so why don't we give us 45 seconds of Zen as we simply walk by and focus on the beauty of the area.
All right, gang, so we know that once we find out that Daniel Sickles has moved his corps out here, George Gordon Meade makes 4 quick decisions. He's going to have the 2nd Corps support the Sickles advance line. He's going to send the 5th Corps out here. He's going to send Warren up to Little Round Top, and he's going to send Henry Hunt and part of the artillery reserve out to support this advance line. So what we're going to find here, some of the 5th Corps units are going to start to come in here, one of which is going to be the 4th Michigan. The 4th Michigan happens to be commanded by a gentleman by the name of Colonel Harrison Jeffords. Jeffords is a lawyer from Michigan, working in his dad's brickmaking business when the war starts. He's nominated to be the captain of his company when he first starts, not married, sits down with his mother to write out his final will and testament. Now, right before the Battle of Gettysburg, he's at Chancellorsville, goes home on furlough. He takes a vacation on leave. While he's there, right before he comes back, the whole town turns out to give the 4th Michigan a brand new battle flag. When we know how important battle flags are, in an era before radios, command and control is as loud as you can yell, as fast as you could ride a horse or send a runner with a note. Moreover, not only would you never want to lose your battle flag, not only because of the ensuing confusion that would cause, but we knew that members of our community had died guarding that flag. So he stood in front of his hometown and pledged to be the special guardian and defender of that flag. Now, on July 2nd, 1863, the 4th Michigan would find itself in the Wheatfield 2 times that day. On the 2nd time they're back in here, they're literally facing Georgians coming over the wall behind them, and all of a sudden one of his men will turn to him and say, "Sir, I'll be damned if we're not facing the wrong way." And they'll look and they'll find some Georgians coming over the hill behind him. Harrison Jeffords will refuse his right flank, and as he does, to his horror, he realizes the flag is out in front of him. He sees some Confederates are ready to grab it, so he draws his sword, runs out, runs one of the Confederates through. A Confederate will shoot him in the leg. One of his men will shoot down the Confederates. 3 Confederates will rush forward, knock him down, and they'll bayonet him to the ground. Harrison Jeffords will be the senior ranking Union officer to be killed by a bayonet in the American Civil War. And as they carried his body from this field, with the flag, I might add, his last words were what that flag represent. His last words were, "Mother, mother, mother." And of course, that all happens in here as this field is changing hands back and forth. And because we even have Tilton and Schweitzer, those 2 brigades are in here twice, we have multiple units pouring in here. Even as we talked about Meade asking for the 2nd Corps, or Hancock, to support them, we know from all the way up by the Pennsylvania Monument, north of here, he's going to send all of Caldwell's division down here. Somebody want to pick up the story of Caldwell's division?
Well, we were talking about what to go get eat later or something like that, but I think what we're talking about here, and I want to zoom out a little bit. Let me walk this back for a quick second. How do you say it, Doug?
Let me step back for a moment.
Let me step back for just a sec, because this is a big problem. Going back to Doug's point here, I mean, the 3rd Corps isn't just looking to try to stay alive here. They are actually looking to take command of the entire 5th Corps. So the 5th Corps comes over here, and they show up, and Sickles is like, "Well, I guess you're reporting to me." And Sykes is like, "Commander of the 5th Corps, no, I'm not reporting to you. I'm here to support and whatnot." Sickles starts stealing Sykes's batteries, one from Augustus P. Martin, and Martin says, "Sickles shanghaied my batteries." Those are his words. So there's that going on. And then you got another division coming up, and I don't think you talked about Cross, Kelly, Zook, and Brook yet. So imagine, if you will, Cross over there, and then Kelly over here, and tiny brigade, smallest brigade at Gettysburg on either side, and then Zook over there with Brooke in behind, and they are known to clear the wheat field, and that's just what they do. They crash in on that area. They crash through the center or the center. They crash through that side, and Brooke follows up behind them, passes them all up, and then follows around, goes through the wheat field, through those woods, and up to the top of the next ridge where they deliver a fire into one of the supporting brigades. This is Paul J. Semmes. And some of the Confederates I think that you see in those dead at Rose Farm photos are those Confederate soldiers. Paul Semmes's Georgians, perhaps. It could also be Anderson's Georgians. It could be the South Carolinians. I don't know if we'll ever know. It might be a combination of those as well. So this goes back and forth. Brooke cannot hold. He will fall back, and then things get even worse. Just, to summarize here, the Union has more reinforcements coming in. The Confederates have more. Wofford's Georgia Brigade is coming from there. That's the cast of the wheat field. No joke. Confederates came from those woods, these woods, right over in that clearing, these woods, those woods, and from the north side of the wheat field. They all came here from different directions, and so the Union also came from there, and there. So there's the Whirlpool of Battle. And then you have the U.S. regulars show up. They meet decimation at the hands of a powerful Confederate flanking maneuver, and then finally you have the Pennsylvania reserves doing the final push along with the elements of the just arrived 6th Corps, pushing back the Confederates, who at that time looked like a wave on a beach, just getting pushed a little more. They had nothing left in them. They couldn't attack Little Round Top or the Valley of Death at that point, and that really ends the fighting for the wheat field, and they sort of settle into an uneasy peace now for the evening with the wheat field as a no man's land.
So this becomes a really interesting field. If we think about this, 26 acres a week, chest high, golden brown at the start of the day, changes hands some 6 times throughout. And whenever we bring people here, we try and say, what's the most important thing? Some people point at the stone wall, other people point at the little ridge line just behind Chris, and then of course there's the Stony Hill. And truth be told, whoever controls the Stony Hill controls this field. After it changes hands some 6 times, as Gary brought up, this will be arguably the second bloodiest place in North America. And of course the stories out here are horrific. With the wheat field kind of being between the 2 lines at night, we'd have many wounded and dead laying out here. In fact, they said you could walk across parts of this field without ever touching the ground, just walking on the bodies of the dead and wounded. In fact, we have a fairly horrific story from a lieutenant from the 118th Pennsylvania, the Corn Exchange Regiment from Philadelphia. What he talks about is he's wounded in the field, he can't make it to the Union lines. And soon he realizes that as he stays out here overnight, he has to have his sword drawn because many of the farmers' fences have been knocked down, including in the Rose Farm. And so there are hogs out here eating on the dead, and every now and then one of them would come over to take a bite at him, and he'd have to draw his sword and poke the hog to get it to move along. Now there are other stories about what happens out here at night, Doug.
Yeah, there's an account from Lieutenant George Hillier of the 9th Georgia, whose regiment was somewhere in those woods, and as night falls on this battlefield, he hears a man singing. He's singing a hymn called Come Ye Disconsolate, and it is sort of wafting over the battlefield. And that hymn sounds something like this. Come ye disconsolate, where ye languish, come to the mercy seat, fervently kneel. Come ye bring your wounded hearts, here tell your anguish. Earth has no sorrow that heaven cannot heal. Now, Hillier is writing this story in 1904, so 40 years after the battle happens. And if you're familiar with some of Hillier's other writings, he's also writing in a time when it is the conciliatory nature of the lost cause and just of the country kind of coming together at the beginning of the 20th century. So there is, in my mind at least, doubt whether or not this actually happened. But nevertheless, that idea that here, in this moment of brokenness where there are human beings lying dead and dying in this wheat field, as far as the eye can see today, that we are all together in our suffering and our sorrows, and that is definitely true here in the wheat field.
I think we got Chris Mackowski wants to jump on, but let me just say something real quick. Doug Ullman, my compliments for bringing your particular skills as an interpreter into that. That was truly beautiful, man. That was just great. What do you got?
I just wanted to take a second and do a quick 360 because Gary a couple of times has talked about the Whirlpool of Battle, and what a perfect metaphor, because we've talked about reinforcements from Confederates and Union soldiers coming in from all directions. So if we think about that whirlpool, think about just the chaos, and at the center of it is this horrific slaughter. But also, what else does a whirlpool do? It sucks, right? And that's going to be the real key for the Confederate attacks, because this is going to suck the momentum out of Longstreet's echelon attacks. Because instead of continuing to push northward as he feeds more reinforcements into this whirlpool, he's going to get bogged down and he's going to lose that momentum that he needs to carry him forward. And by the time things get up to Cemetery Ridge, he's going to need that momentum, and he's not going to have it because it all got sucked into this whirlpool.
That's good. I'll just hang on to this camera here, and I think we're going to go over to Doug Douds here, who's going to take us up to a notable area. We got some barking dogs, we got a dog on a statue, and we have a little scene plaque.
Yeah, so what we have up here is certainly when we talk about all those units that come in here, one of the ones that Gary brought up is the Irish Brigade. Of course, they're decimated by this point in the war. Down to 575 men, 3 main regiments that had comprised that brigade at the beginning of the war have all now been reduced to 2 companies inside. So it's very small. One of the areas that they come through is here, and what we find is one of the most distinctive monuments on the battlefield. Very photographic, photogenic. What we find is it's going to be the Celtic cross, of course, representing the 3 original Irish Brigade regiments. We also see on there an Irish wolfhound, which they would say was calm when stroked and fierce when provoked. And certainly they were provoked here on the afternoon of July 2nd, 1863. And why don't we just take a moment, we can show this great monument.
We can, we see it, we got some people with even some Irish shirt representation going on here. And here is the Irish wolfhound.
The 3 original regiments, the 63rd, 69th, and 88th New York, got their numbers called right out on this monument in a couple places. If you think about the action that these men have been through, at Antietam, breaking through at the Sunken Road, at Fredericksburg, going up against the stone wall, a couple very important seminal moments for this brigade, which really helped redefine what it was meant to be an Irish American in America. So when they come here to Gettysburg, as Doug said, they're diminished, and yet their story still stands tall on this battlefield and still continues to resonate today.
Now, before we go back there, I want to give a shout out to our friend and American Battlefield Trust trustee, longtime trustee, Bill Vodra, whose ancestor was fighting here in the 5th Michigan and paid the ultimate sacrifice, paid the ultimate price. He's buried in the National Cemetery. Now, where in the world did Doug go? I thought he was just with us.
Well, he's hiding
there.
He is.
What are you doing back here?
Hey, it's one of these little neat places that if you visit the park and you study the battlefield long enough, you find one of these little locations. And this just happened to be an aid station for the 32nd Massachusetts. Again, one of the 5th Corps regiments that come in here from Sykes to support Sickles' advanced position. And what we find here is obviously protected by the rocks, but this is an initial aid station. If you're wounded out on the battle line, you get brought here. And this shows what kind of influence that somebody like Dr. Jonathan Letterman, the medical director of the Army of the Potomac, has had on this army. We really talk about innovation happens in terms of people, process, and product. What he develops as far as people is saying is he thinks there should be a regimental surgeon in every regiment, which means they're there, 1, to go ahead and use preemptive medicine so that people don't get more sick. They start to put best health practices into when they go into bivouac. But it also means that when the unit goes into battle, you now have a doctor going forward with them. That's 1. 2, when we think about product, when the soldier would get wounded out on a battlefield at night or after the battle was over, they would send a regular wagon to pick him up. They would throw him in the back of the wagon. As that wagon jumbled back to some hospital, they would find that that wounded soldier was being just as injured by the wagon ride as it was from the original wound. So Letterman comes up with an ambulance design. What looks like a wagon with extra springs, room for 2 stretchers, and some seats next to it. So that's the product. And finally, Dr. Letterman comes up with a whole idea of triage that we use today. This idea that they would assess casualties and go, well, that's not too bad. You can go ahead and wait till we get you help. Oh, that's a mortal wound. The best we can do is try and make you comfortable. And that needs immediate attention. It is a system of triage that we still use to this day. And the idea that we can come back here just off the main battle line, find a plaque like this where we see that Surgeon Adams was up here supporting and helping those soldiers, and the notion that they could go into the battle with the prospect that they would be cared for in case they were wounded, what that contributed to morale, of course, we could never measure. But it is an interesting place to visit, certainly amongst all these other monuments here in the Wheatfield.
One of the things that I really like about this location is not hidden, tucked away behind the monuments just because it's a cool little spot. Look at the way the topography plays into how they chose this location. So you've got these large boulders around you to provide some cover, but we're also just on the backside of a ridge. So if all that fighting is happening out there in the Wheatfield, you can evacuate your men beyond the ridge, use the benefit of the topography to shield you and protect you as you're doing that emergency triage. Then you can get people further back to the rear for help.
Very cool. Hold on, Chris. How do we end these things?
Well, you know what? We are so delighted to have you with us here at the American Battlefield Trust. We're having such a great time. I'm going to do my big Garry Adelman hands and say thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate you supporting us and supporting battlefield preservation.